Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and as you can see, I'm already joined by one of our guests today. Leah Hirschfeld is with us, and we're going to be joined in just a minute by Karen Nohelty. And I sort of promised, I teased this to you guys last week. First, we thought it was going to be on Friday, and then it moved to today. So excited that they could be flexible. These are two amazing people from the research team at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And I just have so much respect for them, and they join us at least once a month to talk with us about research. And what I love is that they're constantly looking for how can they be helping us to enrich our lives today with the information that they learn from research. And I don't remember whether it was you, Leah, or whether it was Karen. One of you had an idea and came to me and said, is this something you're interested in? I just about plotzed. I was like, yes, this is what we need more than anything else right now. Was it you? Was it your idea?
I think I spearheaded it, but it was the research team in general. I think it was, we send out those monthly newsletters. And so also to internally for the audience, to the company. And then also on top of that, we were like, we should probably do something to the external community at large. But it was the whole R&D. So I can't take any credit. It's Dennis and Karen and CJ and everyone.
Okay, so tell our audience what the topic was. I've already teased it to them, but tell them what you guys proposed. And there's Karen. There's Karen. Welcome, Karen.
Hi there.
So thrilled to have you. I was just asking Leah to tell what the topic was that you guys had proposed to talk about that made me so excited.
And I think Shannon, I think you brought it up, but so what the topic that has come up, I think from a few viewers at least, questions has been about remote learning, also known as distance learning, also known as online learning. When I was researching information, I had to look up all those different kinds of terms.
Also known as the biggest headache for every parent right now, and the biggest fear factor for every parent of a special needs child, you know, this day, this week, this month, this summer, the thing that we're all sweating right now. Yeah. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that quickly before we jump into that. I'll quickly introduce myself, and I can introduce Karen, and or she can introduce herself too. But Karen and I, like Shannon said, are both part of our research team. Karen is the head of our research department, so she's a big deal. And I'm a research coordinator. And so basically what that means is that we get to spend our days, very luckily, reading research articles, exploring potential research project ideas, and then running experiments with our participants to answer questions that will address best clinical practices for our families and our patients. And the larger autism community. So it's very exciting, and I won't speak for Karen, but I think we both, I guess I will speak for Karen, both feel very lucky to be on the research team. And so what I'll jump into is the current research on distance learning, and then luckily we get Karen here who can provide more clinical information and kind of best practices to support yourself, your child, your teachers, as we all very much struggle through internet learning. So on that note, I'll jump into the research. And I was very excited about this, in part because I know Australia's done a lot of distance learning. So I was expecting a lot of information on distance learning from Australia, but actually found out that in the United States, we have had public online charter schools since the 2000s, since 1999, 2000. So this has been going on for 2 decades, which is to me just mind blowing, because I remember technology back in the 1999, 2000s, and it was not something I would want to learn on. But so this has been going on for a while. So this is not necessarily new to the larger community, though it might be new to our parents and our kiddos. So unfortunately, though, there's not a ton of research out on special education and distance learning. So I'll launch into distance learning generally, and then I'll talk about what special education research there is. And then, like I said, Karen will jump into the clinical takeaways. Thanks. And so there is a 2004 study. Again, this is 2004. So I just keep wrapping my head around these dates that I was finding. Was a study that evaluated online 3rd through 12th grade education programs. And the programs were completed from 1999 to 2004. And this is not special education. This is typical developing education. But they found that distance education had the same effect on measures of student academic achievement when compared to traditional instruction. So what that means is that they took students whose scores from state and national tests via the online education program, and then also took comparable students who had traditional education services and also looked at state and national test scores, and there was no difference. So basically the same effect, traditional distance education, you're getting the same test scores on national and state tests. Again, this is not special education. This is, you know, our mainstream education, or but if you extrapolate out there, there is evidence here that distance learning is effective and can get us the same results for our kids that we're hoping for. But moving on now to special education, which is the more pertinent information there. So like I said, online education for special education has been happening since the 2000s, which again, to me is just mind blowing. And I only found one study, and I'll talk about that study in a little bit. But what I did find, which was really interesting, was a survey results from special education directors. And so they talked to different states' special education directors and assessed how often or how many states were providing online education options to special education children. And so in 2009, only 3 states had a remote learning option for students with autism. By 2012, that number was 20. I don't know what that number is now, but 8 years ago, that was 20 different states had an online option for kids with autism. I'm hoping that number is higher. And I want to point out those numbers in part because, like I said, there's not much research here. But if you're getting 3 states doing this in 2009 and 20 states doing that in 2012, the reason is probably because someone wants it. School systems find this beneficial, or parents and kids are finding this beneficial. So hopefully that kind of gives a little confidence in those numbers. And like I said, by 2020, I don't know what those numbers are, but 8 years ago, almost half of the states were offering online classes and educational options for individuals with autism. Very cool. And then, like I said, I found one study that did look at teaching special education children through an online service, and that paper is from this year, 2020. The special education kiddos were not kids with autism, they were kids with hearing impairment, but still special education, so I'm gonna throw it at y'all. And this was a really cool study. It was teaching special education students about atomic structure. So they ended up teaching learners, about atoms, and it was cool because of the virtual environment, they could actually interact with the atoms. They could build an atom from different periodic table elements. They could build isotopes and molecules all within that virtual environment. And at the end of the study, they did a pre-test and a post-test on students' creative and flexible thinking. And they found gains there where students really did have improvement in their flexible thinking and their creative thinking. Again, these aren't students with autism, these are students with hearing impairment. But like I said, there is some information out here that is saying that this is stressful for sure, but has good options available. And when I talk about, this is stressful, I'll launch into those negatives that we did find a little bit. So in that 2012 report, there were some disappointing perspectives. 6 of the states were concerned about the quality of the education they were providing online, and that monitoring that quality was difficult. And even one state said that almost none of their students with disabilities were receiving all of the necessary supports specified in their IEPs. That is wildly disappointing, but this is 2012, so hopefully 8 years have gone by. Hopefully there's some achievements, and that's also where we have Karen luckily joining us so that she can kind of bring into, well, what can we do also here clinically to make sure that all those IEP supports are in place, even though we're in a virtual environment. And so again, there are these concerns, and while distance learning can be beneficial to students with ASD, there definitely needs to be more emotional and social supports, along with some kind of way to have a break in between, because this is, you can only imagine, a very difficult situation. And so the big research question that still really needs to be answered is, in my opinion at least, is what accommodations can be made to the online learning environment to enrich those learning experiences. I don't have research on it. I don't think there is research on it, though. If anyone knows, please send it our way. But again, that's why we have the head of research here, Karen, to kind of talk about, strategies to make distance learning successful, and then also to answer any questions or any concerns that your viewers might have.
Okay. Karen, I hope you got something in your bag of tricks for us, because I gotta say, well, I love the information. I'm not left feeling all warm and fuzzy that like we've got this figured out.
Yes. So as parents, there's a lot that you can do. I know it's stressful, it's time consuming. There's nothing that we can really do to help those factors, but we can help your child be more successful with the online learning environment.
Okay.
One of the biggest things you can do is break the work into smaller chunks. In order to help your child be more successful with it. And that's going to be different for every kid. So you're going to have to know your kid a little bit in order to know how to break these things down. But I would err on the side of breaking things down into smaller chunks than you think you may need. And that may be doing one worksheet and then going and having your kid take a break and then come back and doing a second worksheet. It may be doing 2 problems and then taking a break and then coming back and doing 2 more problems. It may be watching 5 minutes of a video clip that the teacher has sent and then taking a break and then coming back. So I think if you can break them into smaller chunks and be more successful, that's going to be much better than pushing through 2 hours with your kid and getting half of that work done, So.
Yeah. I got to be honest, I feel so as I'm sitting here, my head is churning and I'm going, the tough part is a lot of this is going to fall to the parent. Like I heard you say, the parent is going to have to chunk this down. And I think we were all sort of hoping that the teachers were going to have this piece together. And I think in some places that's true. But I keep thinking about for the parent that's, first of all, for the parent that's motivated, who says, I don't want my child to fall behind and I want them to get further. That parent's going to have to take a couple of big steps up and maybe even potentially is going to, elevate themselves to the point where they are going to function in the role of what in the classroom would have been the instructional aid. Now, for the parent that maybe is super motivated and wants to do this, but has a job, a job in which they have to work, for that parent, I'm clutching my chest, and going, what do you do? Because you got to keep a roof over the head, but your child who's entitled to this education, I know we're all waiting to see whether they're going to approve aides going to the homes.
Yes.
And I gotta say, if you're the parent with a job, I would be fighting, tooth and nail with your school district. All these school districts were talking about doing a hybrid method where they were willing to risk having the kids come to school twice a week. So I don't understand why they're not willing to risk having an aide come to your house every day. You're gonna want to create a pod with that person and be super safe, but I think there's room to argue that. But I'm not hearing people getting that. I interrupted you. What else you got in your bag of tricks, Karen?
Well, to go off of what you were saying, and this is not research based at all, but I've heard some parents talking about doing pods with other families. So if you know of another family or two who is also working on distance learning, maybe you can have the kids all go to one house, have that parent work with all of the kids potentially, and then maybe the parents take turns. So I've heard that suggestion. On that same note about scheduling, if the parent's working, unless there are specific Zoom calls with the teacher, who's to say it has to be done Monday through Friday?
That's true. That's true. You could say to your teacher, I need, so there's those times when the child is there in class with you, but all the classwork that you're counting on being done afterwards, I need to be able to have it turned in on Monday and we'll make the classroom Saturday and Sunday. Right. I would encourage people, that's a good idea. I would encourage people to get that written into their IEP, that homework can be handed in,
yes,
to accommodate that, so that your child is never marked late. That's a very good idea. Okay, what else? You're like Santa Claus right now, yeah?
If I can jump in quickly, there's also one of the things that Australia has seen work well too with the distance learning is exactly what you're saying, is that you don't have to be, your kid doesn't have to meet the group deadlines that you have to set in a class setting now. You can have that flexibility and say, we need 2 weeks to do this, and that's okay, because you have those one-on-one meetings, and you don't necessarily need to be at that same pace with all those kids that you're not in the physical room with anymore. So you can have that conversation with your teachers and say, we're going to do this Friday through Monday, and we'll have this done these dates versus the dates that maybe in a traditional classroom you would want to have set.
Okay. All right. Okay, Santa Claus, what else do you have in your bag?
Talking also a little bit more about the amount of time to spend on schooling at home. I've supported a number of children doing homeschooling at home. And, not that I'm an expert in homeschooling, I was supporting their ABA program around their homeschooling program. And none of the kids I've ever worked with spent 6 hours a day in homeschooling. So I think that's an important expectation to set, is that your child probably will not have 6 hours of schoolwork a day. And I would not seek out 6 hours of schoolwork a day, number one. So if you are getting that, then maybe work with the teacher. Maybe it's a little too much. And if you're not getting that, that's okay. Your child wasn't working on academics the entire time they were in the school day. So that's something to also think about and be comfortable and okay if they're not spending 6 hours a day on academics.
Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not getting the same and equal and even. But if you think about it, when you're being taught something one-on-one versus when you're being taught something to a room with 30 people, then only your questions are being answered, and you might be able to move through the material quicker.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's that possibility. I mean, we see that there's a very world-renowned school that there's a version of it that shares the same office complex as Card Corporate, and they only work one-on-one with kids, and they're world-renowned, top-notch, very expensive school. And those kids, and some of them are autism, some of them are not, some of them are other special needs, and they work one-on-one, sometimes distance, sometimes in person, and they fly through their material because it's that one-on-one attention. Yeah. Okay. So what else?
Yeah, and on that note too, I want to highlight that there's so much more to school than academics. School teaches socialization, which can be hard, planning, problem solving, organization, following directions, emotional self-regulation. So even doing things like chores, even doing things like helping make dinner, reading a recipe, playing a board game, those things all target some of those skills, some to greater extents than others, gardening, reading, so incorporating those sorts of things in the day can be really helpful. And to think about, okay, what can my child do on their own while I'm working? If my child loves to read, okay, you do the reading by yourself while I'm working, and they're engaged in something productive. Or maybe, the two kids in the home can play games together, and you set some time for them to play games together. And that's going to vary depending on the kids, but don't ignore those kind of activities that are also really crucial to our kids' success.
Which goes to, somebody just asked the question, how to make distance learning more interesting. Yeah. And those things, exactly, thinking outside the box, we've covered before on the show, and we can go back to it as well, that there are so many resources online. You can stop and do a virtual walkthrough of almost any museum in the world, right? And a lot of times they're putting curriculum with that through the museum. Yes. Or there are even amusement parks that have walkthroughs. We're big fans of Universal Studios here in our house, because that's my husband's employer. And there are things that you can do where you can take a virtual ride on most of the rides. They exist on YouTube. And then you could do a physics discussion about how are they making that happen. You know what I mean? It requires being creative, but sometimes half the creativity has been done for you. Yes. So there's that. Somebody else says, one thing I like about distance learning in the spring was that I could see my son was struggling with certain things and I could make adjustments for him. Now I know to ask for those supports and tweaks in his IEP.
And that was one of the points I was going to say is, I've got some more tips for you guys, but parents need to ask. They need to ask, like, these modifications are in my child's IEP. How are we making them happen? And use the we. It's not how am I going to make it happen? It's how are we, because the school team should be there to support you and help figure it out. But they may be a little bit overwhelmed. So they may need you as the parent to seek out and ask that question.
But I want to point out, and we've been saying this on a regular basis, Bonnie pointed this out to us, that your school does have a legal obligation now that they're asking for you to do some of the pickup at home with distance learning. They have a legal obligation to teach you how to do the things they're asking you to do. They can't just hand you a stack of worksheets and say, good luck with that. They have to teach you how to do it, but you must ask them. You've got to say, so here's this support that's in the IEP that maybe is already there, that you're asking that it be there. And you have to say to them, so how am I facilitating that? Who's training me and how to do that? And they legally have to give you that training.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
sure.
Legally that's there. They must do it, but you should document it, you asking. And I don't know that I'm going to say this with love, but I don't know that they really know how to teach you how to do it, but they're going to have to figure it out. That's on their end. That's not on your end.
Sure.
And I will say this, that a lot of parents have said that when they did step up to the plate in the spring and work with their kiddos, they saw their kiddos make more progress.
Yes.
And they saw, like this parent, oh, that's what he's struggling with. I need to ask for that to be put in the IEP. And that is, information is knowledge, right? But it does mean that at some point we have to square that with the school and get them to carry on the work that you guys have been doing. Okay, so what else have you got, Karen? Are you at the end of what you've got?
Sure, I've got a little bit more. Some of these strategies, I'm sure your listeners, viewers have heard already, but use a schedule. Use a schedule, write things out, use pictures if needed to set really clear expectations, not only for your child, but for yourself as well. So you know what's going to happen. Include your child in the process as much as possible, give choices, make it really clear. First, we're doing this worksheet, then we're playing the Wii for a little bit. First, we're doing this Zoom call with your teacher, and then we get to go for a walk, whatever that may look like for your child. And I think to your point too about doing this work with your child at home, you're going to get to know them really well, and you're going to get to know what they can do, what they can't do. And I would encourage the parents to think about, okay, make a list. What can my child do of the school activities on their own? And what do they need me for? And the things that they can do on their own, you're still going to have to set the expectations, set the schedule, set a reinforcer once they complete it. But if you don't have to be there with them for those activities, that frees you up a little bit.
Okay, we got a bunch of different questions that have come in, and somebody wants to know, would what you're talking about work for people in college, university as well?
I couldn't see why not. I think you would definitely have to take into more consideration the college student themselves and what they want to do, and setting them up to be a little bit more independent. So definitely all of these things work with those components in mind.
Yeah, if you think about it, you guys, I mean, this applies to all of us in our lives, right? I notice that, I love doing these Zoom meetings, right? But it is a different kind of taxing than face-to-face meetings. And I've had to build into my schedule, like if I have a day today, I pretty much have 5 hours of back-to-back Zoom, right? But anytime I got 10 minutes, I have to go walk and see the world and take that break. And at the end, if I have 8 hours of Zoom meetings, I am a different level of exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted, but I'm physically, because I've been sitting, right? So I have to get up and move around. And I think we all have to be mindful of these things and take breaks and make things reinforcing and change it up a little bit. That's just, life. We all need that. We have somebody who's writing in from India. And they are saying that they have a 3-year-old child and they are using the term MR. That is not a term that we use here in the United States anymore. We say developmentally disabled, but they are asking for a recommendation. Her IQ is 56. Now at 3, this child does not have to do distance learning, which is the topic we're talking about, But I think that we could all agree that a 3-year-old with a developmental delay is somebody who could benefit from some really intensive ABA that is
Yes.
not necessarily funded unless she also has an autism diagnosis. And in India, that may not be funded in any case. But I'd love to hear what you guys say, but I would love to encourage this person to maybe look at IBT, the Institute for Behavioral Training, and get trained themselves in some things that they can do that will help their child to learn and grow. You guys, anything you want to add?
Yes, I would just definitely echo ABA would be great for that child. And as much as the parent can provide themselves, the better if no other services are available. There are also, in addition to IBT, definitely look at different books. Potentially Catherine Maurice's, oh my goodness, I just had the title and it just flew out of my head. Let Me Hear Your Voice, I believe. That's a parent talking about early on in ABA, their struggles in getting ABA for their child. But I think that gives a good guidance as to how to, maybe if you've got to do this program on your own, some supports there. And there are definitely some other resources that I can look into and maybe provide.
There you go. I also know that in India, there is a large community of OTs, and there is some OT therapy that is pretty widely available in India. And I would certainly participate in that, get yourself some support there. But I really want to encourage, as much as I love and respect the OT community in India, I still firmly believe that your child will do more and do better if you're doing ABA in conjunction with OT. And I know that that's less available, but there's more and more available online. You'll find some of that at ibehavioraltraining.com. There's also skills. Once you know what it is you're doing, you'll want to look at skillsforautism.com for a curriculum. We have lots and lots of parents in India who use skills and IBT together to help their children.
And just a couple little notes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
A couple little notes there just to help the parent now. Talking to your child a lot helps more than you think. Just modeling lots of language and requiring your child to use language with you, to use the language that they have. That's something that you can do now to start with, and just play with your child as well.
There you go. We only have 30 seconds left, ladies. Any last thoughts?
I have one quick one, and this just popped in my head, but also I would recommend, don't be afraid to ask for help from your extended family if you have it. If you trust your extended family, if you have a grandma who misses their grandson or granddaughter, ask them to play hangman with your child, or tic-tac-toe, or set out a clue game and your child can move it around. I've done that. Or just have the child FaceTime and tell them what they see. All of that, like Karen said, is great input. It's lovely for the other person potentially who really is missing that input as well. So don't be afraid to ask for help from your extended family. It takes a village.
Absolutely. And be doing that now before school starts so that they're getting used to interacting with people online. Ladies, thank you so much. I appreciate you more than you know. We'll keep checking in. I think a year from now, the research on distance learning for the special needs community is going to be robust.
Yes, I agree.
Wish we had the benefit of all that knowledge now, but we will, I guess we'll be the guinea pigs.
Yep, pretty much.
So that's what we'll do. All right, ladies, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.